A very good morning. Today is July 4th, 2020. The major headlines of the paper is Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives to Leh. Prime Minister Modi arrived to Leh, capital city of Union Territory of Ladakh. The Modi ji arrived is one of the forward locations in Nimmo early in the morning yesterday. He interacted with the personnel of Army, Air Force and ITBP. Located at 11,000 feet, Nimmo is among the toughest terrain, surrounded by Ganskar Range and on the banks of Indus. And he also addresses that age of expansionism is over. Narendra Modi says in Ladakh, India's resolve to protect its territory is high as the Himalayas, he asserts. There are 4 articles of the Hindu editorial. The first article is on reset rural job policies, recognize women's work. It emerges from the lockdown that in India, labor market policy had a reverse, the pandemic gender differentiated impact. The second article is on police violence and how some lives do matter. As a country, Indians seek accountability selectivity because their commitment to the rule of law is not principle. The third article is on Italian marine cases. The Italian marine case meets with a disappointing end as India loses the right to trial in Hague in Netherlands. The fourth article is on flattening the COVID-19 curve. India needs a comprehensive approach to the virus centered around the wider testing. Hello friends, I am Prashant. I welcome you all to Wifi Study Karo. If you are first to my channel, I request to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you cannot miss the further updates. Let's get started. The first article is regarding the reset rural job policies, recognize women's work. The COVID-19 pandemic had a huge impact on women's work, but as official statistics do not capture women's work adequately and accurately, a light attention had been paid to the consequences of the pandemic for women workers and to design the specific policies and program to assist them. A survey by Ajit Premji University of 5,000 workers across 12 states, of whom 52% were women workers, found that the women workers were worse off than the men during the lockdown. Among the rural casual workers, for example, 71% workers or women lost their jobs after the lockdown. The figure was 59% for men. Data from Center for Monitoring Indian Economy (CMI) also suggests that the job losses in April 2020 as compared to April 2019 were large for rural women and then men. The pre-COVID-19 situation. To comprehend the effects of the COVID-19 on women workers, we need to begin with the situation before this pandemic. The author here draws an experience of last 10 years with the village studies conducted in collaboration with Foundation of Agrarian Studies (FAS). According to the National Labour Forces Survey, a quarter of adult rural women were in the labour force or counted as workers in official days in 2017 to 18. If we examine the data from this time use surveys, that's it, the surveys that collect the information on all activities undertaken during the fixed time period, usually 24 hours, the picture changes radically. There is no official time use survey data. The National Statistics Official Office did not conduct a time use survey in 2019, but results are not available. The author used a detailed analysis of village level time use surveys from Karnataka with the data of 24 hours a day from 7 days consecutively over 2 agriculture sessions of 2017 to 18 to illustrate the ground level situations. Taking time spent in economic activity or what falls with the production boundary in the system of national account or SNA, using the standard definition of the workers as one who spent the major time during the reference week in economic activities. Time use data show that although there were seasonal variations in work proportions or participations, almost all the women came with a definition of a worker in the harvest season. Crisis of regular employment. These data suggest that the finding is echoed in observations by women activities that the rural women face a crisis of regular employment. In other words, when women are not reported as workers, it is because the lack of employment opportunities rather than it being an account of the withdrawal from the labor force. The crisis of regular employment have intensified during the pandemic and the lockdown. A second feature of rural women's work brought light the gender disaggregated data at the household level in villages across India surveyed by FAS, and is that women from all sections of the peasantry, with some regional exceptions, participate in paid work outside the home. In the thinking of potential workforce, thus we need to include women from almost all sections of the rural household and not just women from rural labor or manual worker household. A third feature of our village finding is that the younger and more educated women are not often seeking a work because they aspire to skilled non-agriculture work, whereas the older women are more willing to engage in manual labor. A fourth feature of rural India is that women's wages are rarely equally to men's wages, with a few exceptions. The gap between the female and male wages is highest for non-agriculture tasks, the new and growing source of unemployment. Finally, an important feature of rural India pertains to the women's work day. Counting all the reforms of the work, economic activities and care work, or work in cooking, cleaning, child care, elderly care, a woman's work day is exceedingly long and full of drudgery. In the FAS Time the Use survey, the total hours worked by women in economic activity and care range from 61 hours to 88 hours in the lean season, with a maximum of 91 hours or 13 hours per day in a peak season. No woman puts less than 60 hours work in a week. Lockdown and jobs. How did the lockdown affect the employment for rural women? A rapid rural survey conducted by FAS showed that in large parts of the country where rain-fed agriculture is prevalent, there were no agricultural activity during the lean months in March to May. In the areas of irrigated agriculture, there were harvest operations such as for rabi wheat in northern India, but they were largely mechanized. In other harvest operations such as vegetables, there were also growing tendency to use more family labor and less hired labor on account of fears of infection. Put together, while the agricultural activity continued, employment available to women during the lockdown was limited. Employment and income in the activities allied to agriculture such as animal rearing, fisheries or floriculture were also adversely affected by the lockdown. Our villages studied shows that when the household own animals, be it the milch cattle or chickens or goats, women are inevitably part of labor process. During this lockdown, the demand for milk had at least 25% as hotels, restaurants closed, and this was reflected in either lower quantity sold or lower prices for both. For women across the country, incomes have been from sale of milk to daily cooperative shrank. Among fisheries, men could not go to sea and women could not process or sell fish to fish products. Non-agricultural jobs came to a sudden halt in the construction site. Brick lanes, petty stores and eateries, local factories and other enterprises shut down completely. In the recent years, women have accounted for more than one half of the work in the public work, but no employment was available through the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, that is NREGS, till late in April. The first month in the lockdown thus saw a total collapse of non-agricultural employment for women. In May, there was a big increase in the demand for NREGS employment. On the new source of women's employment in the last few decades have been government schemes, especially in the health and education sector, where the employment, for example, women work as Anganwadi workers or midday meal cooks. During this pandemic, accredited social health activities or ASHAs, 90% of whom are women, have become the frontline health workers, although they have been not recognized as the workers or paid regular wages. Effect of health and nutrition. While the lockdown reduced employment in agriculture and allied activities and brought almost all non-agriculture employment to a standstill, the burden for care work mounted, with all the members of the family at home and children out of the school. The task for cooking, cleaning, child care and elderly care became more onerous. There is no doubt that managing household tasks and provisioning in a situation of reduced income and tightening budgets will have long-term effects on women's physical and mental health. The already high level of malnutrition among rural women is likely to be exacerbated as households cope with a reduced food intake. A new roadmap. As we emerge from the lockdown, it is very important to begin first by redrawing our picture of rural labor market by including the contribution of the women, while the immediate or short-run provision for employment of women can be through an imaginative expansion of NREGS. A medium and longer way our plan needs to generate women's specific employment in skilled occupations and in businesses and new enterprise. In proposed expansion of health infrastructure in a country, women who already play a significant role in healthcare at the grassroots level must be recognized as workers and paid a fair wage. In expansion of rural infrastructure announced by the finance minister, specific attention must be paid to safe and easy transport for the women and from their homes to workplaces. As the lockdown is lifted, economic activity is growing, but the young and old still remain at home. Further, as the COVID-19 infection spreads, given the higher likelihood of cases among men and women, the burden on women as earners and carers is likely to rise. We need immediate measures to reduce the drudgery of care work. To illustrate, healthy meals for school children as well as elderly and the sick can reduce the task for home cooking. It is a time for women to be seen as an equal partner in the task of transforming the rural economy. Regarding the rural job policies, how the women should take part in transforming the rural economy equally as men without any gender bias. The next article is on the violence and how some lives do matter. As we begin to read this article, we would like to think that the reactions of Hyderabad police in Disha case, the incident which took on December 2019, must surely bring back memories of collective celebration of justice have been executed swiftly. The showering of petals, the Rakers calls for adopting such measures of instant justice, and our pride in such police officer must still be vivid in our memory. Now contrast to that reactions in the response of custodial killings of Jairaj and his son Benix in Thoothukudi, Tamil Nadu. Celebrities, media platform, politicians, Twitter and Facebook users and general public all aghat at the brutal violence inflicted on these two men. Everyone collectively reminding us that we need to keep our police in check, that we must not tolerate such abuse of police power while lamenting the lack of rule of law in our society. The contrast in the response of these two incidents could not be starker. What lies at the heart of this contrast was it because for the four men in Hyderabad were accused for raping, murdered and burning the body of victim. It revolted us so much that we were willing to accept this version of instant but illegal justice and trust the police that when they told us that it was indeed these four men who were responsible. Despite no court having looked onto it, they were convinced that they deserved to be killed in that manner for what they believed that they had done, conveniently blurring the lines between our moral judgment and limit we must be placing on police power. A different reaction, but with the Jairaj and Benix, we must ask how it really shocks us. It is just that they were brutally assaulted and violated in the manner that caused their death. Or is our shocks inextricably connected to what they were accused of? They were tortured in this manner for keeping the shop open for a few minutes after the lockdown timings, or what we will not accept from the police in terms of their abuse and power seems to be intrinsically linked to our moral evaluation of what they tell us people in their custody are accused of. When they present to us as sexual offenders, terrorists and anti-nationals, we find ourselves reposing great faith in narratives they feed us and are even eager for it to be true. It is literally a few steps away from the mob justice. It is just that we let the police and legal system do our dirty work. But thankfully, our families of Jairaj and Benix, we have judged differently as we are on the other side of this time. The data that we must also be careful not to mistake our reactions in the cases of some commitment to the rule of law and in a due process. The track record of a public and legal conversation on torture and fixing accountability for the present a very different picture. In the last 3 years, the National Human Rights Commission had received nearly 5,300 complaints in custodial death, that is police and prison, and we can also assure that it is only a fraction of actual number of such deaths. It's reporting such difficult deaths in a difficult the legal process to investigate, prosecute and fix accountability have even more hurdles. It's evident from the fact that while government data records only 1,727 deaths in police custody between 2000 to 2018, only there are 26 police officials were convicted. In a country where the custodial torture and killing is open secret, it is baffling that we still do not have a domestic law that enables torture prosecution by accounting for particularities of custodial torture. We continue to struggle with these inadequacies of regular criminal law in this regard, an issue glossed over, despite suggestions by the Law Commission of India that if a person dies in a police custody, the burden should be on the police to show that they are not responsible for it. The law still requires a prosecution to prove that the police caused the death. India's political commitment to address torture is symbolized by its failure to ratify the UN Convention against the 19 countries to have not adopted. The Supreme Court on India had laid down many measures to prevent torture and fix accountability, but these judgments are rarely followed. Even legislative mandates suffer at the same fate. Besides the usual police investigation into custodial death, the law mandates an independent magisterial inquiry. It is perhaps a reflection on our institutional apathy that such inquiries have happened only about 20% of the custodial deaths. And to top the prosecution of the police officials for custodial torture requires the sanction of the government. The question about why torture is rampant and no straightforwardness answers. One of the causes is that system incentives torture by seeking convicts without modernizing the police force. However, the police violence is not limited to the investigation and goes well beyond that. The use of the torture is also often justified by the police personnel as being required to teach the hardened criminals on behalf of the society. But here, the killing of Jairaj and Burnix, the police seem to have inflicted violence out of the sheer expectation of impurity. It reflects deeply worrying aspect of the torture when police unleash violence because they know that the chances of being held accountable are slim. The worst thing we can do is to think that the incidents of Sathankulam police station in Tamil Nadu as being perpetrated by a few errant police personnel. There is an institutional and police culture that breeds, protects and even celebrates the kind of violence. At the heart of the culture that our proclivity to embrace mob justice in situations where it feels it is deserved, and at the instant when the forces will confront murders such as those of Bennix and Jairaj, we must acknowledge that our celebration and tolerance and police brutality is just as much to blame as anything else. The blood of Bennix and Jairaj are on all our hands. Regarding the police comparison between different cases and how they are brutally using their police power and how they should keep in check with the new rule or law. The next article is on Italian marine case. The long quest for the justice of two Kerala fishermen shot dead by Italian marine from Enrica Lexi about 20.5 nautical miles off the Indian coast on February 2012 has ended in disappointment. An international arbitration court had ruled that India does not have any jurisdiction to try these marines who is held were entitled to immunity as they were acting as behalf of the state. The Permanent Court of Arbitration, that PCA, in The Hague in Netherlands admitted that both India and Italy had concurrent jurisdictions in the matter, but concluded that the marines' immunity precluded India's jurisdiction. In India's favor, the PCA found that Italian vessels have not violated the right and freedom of navigation of India, a fishing vessel under UNCLOS, and that the action, which was accused loss of lives, property and harm, merited compensation. It asked the parties to consult each other on the compensation due to India as a result. More significantly, the PCA rejected a key argument by Italy that India, by leading the Italian vessel into its territory and arresting the Marines, violated its obligation and cooperated with measures to suppress the privacy under Article 100 of UNCLOS. This may mean that the arbitration court did not view the incident as one related to piracy at all. The incident had caused national outrage, and the public saw that these as wanton killings in so much as circumstances indicated no attempt by fishing a vessel at piracy. The fishing vessel was within the country's contiguous zone, and it was quite clear that the offence warranted arrest and prosecution under the domestic law. With the piracy angle ruled out, a regular trial was in order. The Union government could have taken over the prosecution and ensured a quick trial. However, the legal tangles were being sorted out and India was dealing with a diplomatic fallout. The Marines managed to obtain orders to leave the country. The Supreme Court have ruled out that only the centre and not Kerala can prosecute the Marines. A bigger legal issue which caused more delay came later. The National Investigation Agency invoked and suppression of unlawful acts against safety and maritime navigation and fixed platforms of Continental Shelf Act 2002. This caused a diplomatic furore as it provides for the death penalty. The EU threatened to impose trade sanctions. Untimely, it took time for these charges to be dropped. The PCS award, which is final and has been accepted by India, is a huge setback for the expectation of the two Marines who would face a criminal trial in India. In the end, Italy succeeded in taking the matter out of India's hands. It should now make goods on the commitment to have the Marines tried its under domestic laws. The takeaway for India should have been the lessons in the legal and diplomatic domains that we can be drawn from the experience. Regarding the Italian Marine case, which meets a disappointing end as India loses its trail. The next article is on flattening the COVID-19 curve. India needs to comprehensive approach to handle the virus. 5 months after WHO declared the COVID-19 as a public health emergency international concern, and 3.5 months after it called the disease as a pandemic, its spreads does not seem to have been slowing down globally. Instead, infections and the death toll continue to rise alarmingly. After a sharp increase in March, the fresh cases reported have steadily increased, breaching to 10 million mark in June. Till June 29, the death toll had touched the grim milestone of 0.5 million. With the addition of each million new cases taking a few days in the previous ones, the pandemic is truly accelerating, as if the summer heat had invigorated the virus. June alone accounted 60% of the cases reported so far. The second half of the June has been particularly bad, on 150,000 cases reportedly almost daily. On June 16th, 0.19 million new cases were recovered, the highest reported on the single day since the outbreak in China. US, Brazil and India have been driving to spike. On July 1st, US witnessed a single largest spike of nearly 50,000 cases, which is more than the total number of cases reported in Singapore, South Korea and other countries. As on July 3rd, India had also reported 0.6 million cases and 18,662 deaths. The acceleration of fresh cases began in the first week of May and increased sharply in June. While Maharashtra had most cases, infection in Tamil Nadu and Delhi have been steadily increasing. Regarding the increase and how we can curb the situation on the flattening of COVID-19 norms. Though belated, Tamil Nadu began aggressively testing in hotspot areas in Chennai, and a fortnight ago, moving for the smaller number of targeted tests is to be increased. Community testing positive 2 weeks ago had also led to test positivity rate reducing from 35% to about 20%, and certain areas in China, a test positivity rate of about 20% is highly suggestive as a communal spread in these areas. Equally important is tracing and isolating contacts. Tamil Nadu, however, has the lowest case of fatality rate of 1.3% compared to 4.4% in Maharashtra, and 3.1% in Delhi, and 5.6% in the Gujarat. It is important for every state to take a leaf out of Maharashtra's book and test large numbers daily, unmindful of the rise in fresh cases each day. Deterring on the testing, tracing, isolation, and increased deaths, undermining efforts to contain this pandemic. After all, China, Italy, and Spain have demonstrated that it is possible to bend the curve through comprehensive approach. That center is around testing now. A comprehensive approach is needed to curtail this situation of COVID-19 on flattening of COVID-19 cases. That's the end of article discussion. If you are new to my channel, I request you all to subscribe. You can also follow me on Facebook and Insta. Wifi Study Karo. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.